Today on Arguing Agile, the most common fights that you'll get into as a Scrum Master. We don't call them fights.
No, we don't.
We don't call it. No, that's a polite conversation. We don't call it arguing. We call it spirited discussions.
Spirited discussion. I've had plenty of those.
Disagreements?
After lots of spirit.
Say disagreements?
You could say disagreements. You could say difference of opinion or viewpoints.
Yeah.
I'm sure every Scrum Master has gone through this, by the way, to some degree or the other. So you can stay tuned and you'll see. There's a lot of value to be had from this one.
So here's our framework. We'll talk about what the fight is that you'll get into. We'll talk through an experience or two that either one of us has had with regard to this fight, and we'll talk about how best you might deal with this, which is not to say it's the only way to deal with it.
One of the ways you could deal with it. Yeah. And the pacifists amongst you, if you don't like the word fight, you could just say challenges.
Screaming matches. Let's start with disagreements over estimation.
Ooh, that's a great one. So again, most Scrum Masters have encountered this to some degree or the other. Disagreement on estimation. A good Scrum Master doesn't obviously provide the estimate or anchor the team toward an estimate value. They facilitate the art of estimation. But you're still going to get into some headwind here, right? You're going to have people saying, why do we bother with these numbers? Why don't we just say they're hours? Right? So that's the most common one I've seen where people say, is it 3 hours or 5 hours or is it 8 hours? What if it's 6.5 hours?
Oh, see, you took this in a different direction than I was thinking. I was thinking disagreements of like we're sitting together and estimating a particular work item, and you say it takes 8 hours and I say it takes 4 hours, and we basically we're finding difficulty coming to a conclusion. Although I like what you're saying is we fundamentally disagree of like, story points are garbage. Nobody should ever use them, which I've heard on some other podcasts before. And you say, well, story points have their use depending on the team maturity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we get into a conversation about it where you're just like, I just don't like story points. It'd be better if you're slower to start with until you figure it out. I hadn't even considered that. So let's crowbar these two apart. Which one do you want to start with? We can do both. We can do both.
I think we can do both. I think the one where the Scrum Master encounters resistance on story points, and people say, why don't we just use hours? Really, that one's not so difficult to deal with, right? And that's because you could ask the question. Hours by whom? Hours by a proficient, experienced developer? Hours by somebody who perhaps doesn't have as much experience in the technology? Or just a newbie developer? These are going to be different numbers, which is why we abstract that away in the story point. So that could be a way that you could explain why we use what we use. Let's see. Okay, so I think we've kind of used that one up now, so we can go to the other one. People disagree on the story points, and that's fine. Don't fight it, right? That's the point of the exercise, is so you can have different opinions from different people.
The actual estimations?
The estimate numbers, right? So someone says it's a 3 and someone says, nah, I think it's more like an 8.
You can chew up a lot of time of your refinement just saying, hey, this person says it's a 5 and this person says it's a 13. And those, hey, everyone hold their cards up or whatever, you reveal your cards or whatever it is. And then if somebody has a 13, someone has a 3. Yeah. Obviously the value is in the discussion there, but I can think of teams that I've been on as the product owner to the team, where as the product owner, you're kind of like, you're in refinement, your refinement, you're just trying to get work items broken down. You don't even really care about, oh, well, this is a 13, this is a 5, whatever. Does everyone agree that this has the proper acceptance criteria to do the job? Yes. Like, whatever, let's move on. Let's move on to the next thing. And then when we get into planning, we can break it down further. Or we can take it to subsequent refinements. But I want to get through the first pass, okay? I want to get through the first pass. Some people might hear that and be like, well, this is part of getting through the first pass, is agreeing on it. But as a product manager, especially when I was a contract product manager, and even when I was a permanent employee, I tell people, listen, especially team leads, development team leads, I tell them, don't worry that we only got through one story in an hour. Don't sweat it. Next refinement, we might get through one story in 45 minutes. And the next one, we might get through a story in 30 minutes. But I was like, what you need to pay attention to is the trend of that we're getting through stories quicker, and also the trend of how complex the things that we're talking about are compared to each other. Because if you can't compare things, the complexity of things, if you can't compare complexity of things with each other, first of all, you're missing a critical piece of information. Second of all, I understand you want to get the backlog to a point where like, oh, everything's equal size. So there's really everything's equal complexity. I agree with you. Everything should be equal complexity. However, you're really living in the future at this point where the team can work together and break everything down to the same size. So again, my experience is I'm just trying to get through items, trying to get a high level stamp on them, and then get to the next item. And you know what I mean? Because I know that over time the team will push back and the team will learn this skill.
Yeah, I agree. So there are three things I want to say about this. So the first thing is when someone says it's a 3, someone says it's a 13, right? Obviously dissenting opinions here. And what you want to do quickly as a Scrum Master, you want to now have the conversation among the outliers. Why is it a 3? Why is it a 13? Maybe something that the 13 voter thought about that the others didn't. Could be. So don't just let it go on and on and on. Just say, in a minute, tell us why it's a 13. And then in a minute, tell us why it's a 3.
That'd be really interesting. I think that'd be a really interesting exercise for a Scrum Master with a new team, or maybe maybe a new team to actually have a timer to be like, hey, okay, you say it's a 3. All right, I'm gonna put 1 minute on the clock.
Yep.
You go, whatever. Like maybe that's not a great system because I kind of prefer the back and forth of people interjecting, asking questions and stuff.
You still have that. You can still have that. So the point of the timer is to not just have this thing just going on and on and on forever, right? So have a timer, let's say whatever time you want. I've used a minute before. Believe it or not, a minute's actually quite a long time when you have to explain why you voted, how you voted. And then you say, okay, what does everybody else think, right? There is value in the conversation, for sure. But then the Scrum Master could say, knowing what we know now, let's revote. Yeah. So go ahead and wipe out the votes and revote on that item. Now you're going to get a little more convergence, right? And honestly, we'll use these numbers as illustration, 3 and 13. Let's say the convergence was mostly 5s and mostly maybe some 8s and one person just stayed resolute on the 3. Right. Doesn't matter. Nobody dies on this hill. You pick a 5 or an 8 and just move on, right? Nobody dies on that hill. So that was one of the first things I wanted to say. I have 2 more things I want to say. One is, if you're not, and you hit on this right away from the beginning, if you're not using a reference story to compare the others with, in terms of complexity and all of that, right? You've missed the point. You're not doing relative estimation. Well, you're taking every item in isolation. Right? That's not relative estimation. So that is something that a Scrum Master needs to kind of come in and say, let's pick one of these that we know everybody agrees we can comfortably get it done in a sprint. Relative to that now, let's estimate the others. So the third thing I was going to talk about is this. Look, if the team decides either really kind of willingly or hesitantly, it's a 3, let's say. They go with a 3. Okay. Now, it's in the backlog. It's got a 3 on it. That doesn't mean that 3 has to stay that way forever. So let's say a time comes when the team pulls that into a sprint, and it might be the next sprint, it might not be. When they pull it into the sprint, you learn a little more and go, yeah, we said it was a 3, but, right? This other thing that we just learned since that estimation session, we think we should re-estimate. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? The team can re-estimate that up into a 5 if that's what it takes, or go the other direction. You don't have to die on that sword, right? So that is the third thing.
In that case, my suggestion would be to always be open to engage your product owner to the team to renegotiate stories. So if you start working on something, this happens all the time with teams that take over legacy code from other, maybe they weren't at the company when that code was built, deployed for the first time. When you get into a piece of code, or when you get into a feature and start changing it, you'd be open to say, hey, we found this, and it really would be better if we changed. We said we originally were going to do A and B, and now that we see the middle of the code, A and B is not going to be enough. We need to do X, Y, Z as well. And the product owner that's a perfect opportunity to step in to say, listen, just do A and B as best you can in this sprint. We're going to stay with our scope that we picked. We'll write a new story for X and Y and Z, and we'll do them in subsequent stories, if that's even a possibility, right? If it's possible. If it's not possible, maybe you pull all the work out and you kind of think about what you want to do again. But there are strategies for this. Absolutely.
So again, going back to the role that we're discussing today, the role of a Scrum Master, right? They need to be cognizant of this and say, be open to this idea that we can definitely look at the scope all the time. Mm-hmm. New things that we just learned, engage the product owner and say, well, maybe we need to rewrite this story, or put it back in the backlog and then come back to it, kind of have another pass at the refinement.
Well, the other thing the Scrum Master can do that really would help product at this point that I'm thinking of, at the point where something's been pulled into a sprint and started, like let's say the work is in the sprint, hasn't been started, you started the more important story first. the thing the Scrum Master can help with is, hey, we started on the more important story. We realized that it was a lot bigger than we expected once we got into it. And this second story, which is maybe for a different stakeholder, we're not going to be able to get to it if we end up, like the first story turned from a 3 into an 8. If we do the whole thing in the sprint, which we do think we can, we have to push all the rest of the work out of the sprint. What the Scrum Master can do in that case to really help with is they can help the product manager or product owner with stakeholder management to say, hey, your item slipped. We were going to do it now. We communicated that we were pulling it in. Maybe they got them in a refinement or whatever and got their time. But we discovered this other thing with this other higher priority item. And here's what we're doing. Just keep them informed. So it's another layer of stakeholder management that the Scrum Master can help with to really relieve intense pressure, especially when people were promised things and your product manager has to make a call.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of those situations where, like you said, the Scrum Master can really partner with the product owner,
sure,
or product manager for that matter. Everybody's in it together for the same cause at the end of the day. There is no us and them, us and the business. Anytime your team members say something like, well, the business, they changed their mind, that's a red flag right there. That's when you say, well, who's they? We're all in this together. Can we all just get along?
Oh, my goodness. Let's see. Hey, what else? What other things cause a difference of opinion? I can give you one. Scope creep. Scope creep. We went on the magical fairy tale story of the team discovering something they didn't know when the sprint began, and got with the product owner, and they decided to take the rest of the scope out of the sprint to address the big thing. And I love that fairy tale. It's my favorite one in the world. But more realistically, the product owner or product manager says, oh, that's great that you found that, but we need it all fixed, and we need the other thing we committed to done.
Yeah, very common, right? I mean, this happens all the time. So what do you do as an incoming Scrum Master? Yeah, you hold up a cup and you pour liquid into it, tea, coffee, whatever, and say, this was already full. And now you say you want more, let's keep pouring. And it's going to run over. You've seen that GIF somewhere, I'm sure. You have to talk about what can be reasonably achieved by the end of the sprint. It's fine to keep just throwing things in the sprint, but you're not going to make it, right, with everything. You know that. So why set yourself up for failure? Mm-hmm. Why do that when you can say to the product owner, this is not going to happen? You get to make a choice here, right? But this is not going to happen. So we learned something new. We're going to go with the highest priority item because it is the highest priority item. Consequently, this other thing has to slip. Let me help you understand how we can get to that one, which is the next priority item maybe in a subsequent sprint. Yeah. And to your point, assist product with stakeholder management and communications. It's just all about transparency. So be transparent, but engage with your product person as a partner.
Sometimes the development team are the ones scope creeping things. Sometimes the development team says, oh, we can do this one extra thing. It's no problem. And to be honest about my experience, I'm trying to think. I want to say it's been, I've been coupled with tons of product owners on the team that one extra thing, or development, like development managers, but what I'm trying to say is not like development leads, like senior developers who have more authority but are on the team. I'm talking about like development leads who are not on the team, who press the team members because they're like in their business reporting structure or whatever to say, hey, you got to add this thing to your sprint and just get it done. As you know what I mean? So there is a almost that shadow backlog we were talking about last podcast. Almost that, but maybe not quite that. Like there is that scope creep as well as like
that is a real scenario, all right? So these are tech leads or maybe architects that are not on the team that say, hey, you're doing this great work. By the way, why don't you just enable Datadog and Splunk logging too?
Yeah.
Like these sorts of things happen. And as a Scrum Master, what are you looking for? You're looking for signs where work is added. And again, you're not there wielding a hammer. All you're doing is you simply asking your team, can we deliver the original scope? Yes or no? Yeah. Right? If we can, great. Now, the next question, can we deliver the original scope with the added scope? Right? And have a discussion with that tech lead, architect, whomever, and say, we're full. Right? And if you want us to put something in, we will try our best to do one of those two. Maybe don't commit to everything. Just say, well, we could just make a few entries in a log file, but that's it. Datadog, we can look at next sprint.
This like the architect coming in and saying like, hey, everything you're doing is great and these features work really well, but I have this new data observability requirement on you. But it basically is like they're not injecting work into the sprint, meaning like work to be done in the sprint on the product. They're injecting more of they're like changing the definition of done in the mid sprint to say like, well, the definition of done is everything has an automated test and everything has observability in the logs and everything can be whatever feature flag and
80% code coverage.
And they're coming in and like injecting to say like, oh, now we have this integration with Datadog or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so that got injected mid sprint. We decided, and now it's getting added. Like as this has happened to me many times,
several times.
The tactic that I've always tried to employ is to be like trying to jump onto a train car as the train car is moving. As I'll try to agree, hey, it's mid sprint, or like more likely it's like the first or second day of a sprint. Rather than derailing all of our sprint goals, can we pick up your requirement next sprint and start from usually people giving these requirements will say like, oh, I don't pick it up next sprint, I don't really care, as long as you start doing it and bake it into your definition of done, I'm happy. It doesn't really matter if it's like 8 more days. They won't really push back a lot on that. I'm trying to think if that's true in my experience.
Some do. Some push back.
Some have.
Because they have a hidden agenda somewhere. They promised a leadership or a manager that they'll have these things. In my example, I think this happened. One real example I can offer here is not so much logging, but it was more on app monitoring. Somebody had promised management that they will have application monitoring in place by the end of a sprint. Mm-hmm. And it was never in the DoD. It was never even considered by the team. We acknowledge that would be a good thing to have in the future. But in comes this architect that we want you to do this. Actively monitor the app and try doing X number of logins every minute. And if a login fails, then your app is vulnerable. So restart, do this, do that, whatever it was. So these things happen, but a Scrum Master, going back to the Scrum Master should say, that's a great idea. Can we create a story for that in the backlog? Right. Immediately what's happened here is 2 things. One is you've decoupled the work from existing work in the sprint because it's another story. And it's gone in the backlog, not in the sprint, to be prioritized, considered with all the other stuff, normal stuff that a PO does going forward. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, helps you pave the path to say, that's great. That's great insight. We should do this work. It's in the backlog. Let's revisit that when we look at the backlog, i.e. not this sprint, right?
Let's talk about the elephant in the room of role confusion.
Oh, that really is an elephant. Role confusion.
Like, to me, it's usually people outside of the development team. Usually it's stakeholders who don't understand what Scrum Masters are supposed to do, or development leads who don't understand truly what Scrum Master, or also people have never seen a successful Scrum Master interfacing with a team, so they don't really know what they do. Basically, it's anybody who doesn't really know what an effective Scrum Master looks like.
That's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people, which is weird that it's a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, basically having to teach the market what the position does aside. I know we're like putting everything aside for a second. This is a tough one. Like I can think of every developer I've ever talked to, developers as well, that have said, well, what does a Scrum Master do all day except show up to the daily meeting for 15 minutes?
This is so common, right? And it's more prevalent at organizations where they're kind of at the beginning of their Agile journey, so they haven't seen a whole lot of Scrum Masters that have been effective. And then they formulate their own opinions of what a Scrum Master does, right? So they say, well, a Scrum Master does this. A Scrum Master is the person who I turn to get metrics. A Scrum Master is the person I turn to figure out how to rebuke or reward a team member, for example, right? So these things are very, very, very common out there. More so, not so much in the sort of world where a lot of Scrum Masters play, but outside in the other business domains, HR, finance, legal. They haven't heard the term Scrum Master. Right? So they don't understand. They say, well, Scrum Master, what do they do? And somebody gives a 1 or 2 line explanation and say, oh yeah, that's a project manager in their mind. So I can go to them for everything, all and sundry, Go do this,
Yeah.
go do that, right? So how does a new Scrum Master deal with this? Role clarity. There's role confusion galore, but role clarity is important, right? Somebody did I'm trying to remember who it was now, and I probably should give due credit where it's due. But somebody came out with a couple of diagrams, kind of like the South Park characters. And what is not a Scrum Master? What is a Scrum Master, right? Scrum Master is not the team's coffee clerk, the team's note taker, the team's secretary, and on and on. There's 6 of these. And then there are 6 more. What a Scrum Master is a facilitator, is a team coach, is a this, that. So, yeah, I mean, you can have that, but how do you communicate that to everyone? So
well, I would, if it were me, I would, well, first of all, I would not be in the job of Scrum Master because that's why I work in product. But if it were me, I would start with the person that you directly work for. Whoever has hire/fire authority, I don't know what they call that, reporting person, whatever, you know what I mean,
right?
A hiring manager. I would start with them to get role clarity there, to say, and every time someone asks you to do an additional task, I would start by cycling back through that person and say, hey, I'm doing this, but I want to get clarity that I'm doing it as a favor. So when I push back in the future, when it becomes too much, that pushing back is not seen as being as picking a bone of contention.
Yes, I love it.
Oh, that was so. I don't even know if anyone will understand what that. Like, I can barely understand what bone of contention means.
No turkeys were harmed in the making of this podcast. By the way,
only a few. If the person that you directly work for is in complete agreement with your role and what it is and is not in your job description, you know what I mean? What is and is not expected from you. That's a better way to say it. I don't like saying job description. If the person that you're working for is directly aligned with you, 100% agree with you on what is and is not within your responsibility, your purview, when you do stuff above and beyond, they should write it in the little yearly end of review. Like, oh, Brian went above.
Yeah, exactly.
So good. Like, oh, he got coffee for everyone above and beyond. Coffee's not my job description. It's not expected of me, nor am I going to get penalized when I don't do it like that. But what I've directly observed in this category is Scrum Masters get into this mode of oh, well, the project manager from the PMO wants somebody to write down at the end of the week in their spreadsheet all of the deliverables that you sent to production and what. I mean, that kind of stuff is like, oh, have the Scrum Master do it because everyone knows it's a nonsense task. The Scrum Master, under the banner of just knocking down blockers and keeping the impediments away from the team, kind of volunteers just to do this garbage work. You know, hey, the toilets are all backed up. Someone's got to go plunge them. The Scrum Master volunteers, look, I'll just do it, get it out of the way. You know what I mean? But if the person that the Scrum Master works for directly, even though they don't work for him on that team every day from day to day, knows as well, this is a nonsense task. Scrum Master's doing it. If the Scrum Master wasn't here, they'd ask the developer to do it. It would be a complete waste of the developer's time, right? Those kind of things. Things like that. It would be good whenever you do something like that to go back to the person that you work for, the person who hired you, the person you report through, right? Who does your yearly appraisals. Let's be honest, if you're doing tests like that, you have yearly appraisals, right?
You do. And your bonuses are tied to that, or your salary increments.
Yeah. Sorry. This year, we got to move you to the basement and take away your red stapler.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Don't burn down the place. Yeah. So, look, I agree with you, first of all, wholeheartedly, that you need to make it visible that that's not your responsibility. Right. You're doing a favor. Yeah. I know Scrum Master is supposed to foster the whole concept of easing flow, but come on. Plungers and toilets? That's a different type of flow. Anyhow.
Nope. Same kind of flow.
Yeah. Okay. I'll stop. I won't say what I wanted to say. What I mean is this, though. If you're doing things for people that are outside of your sphere of influence, let me use that term, right? Sure. Somebody came in and said, what do we put into production? Give me a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. You give them a spreadsheet. They come right back and go, can we get a chart with this stuff? Because numbers, right? We want diagrams, pretty diagrams. Give me a diagram. If a Scrum Master willingly goes along and does that, yes, absolutely make it clear to those that you report to that this is something that you're doing as a favor, right? That's a given. You got to do that. Otherwise, you'll be doing it as a career. The second thing is, as a Scrum Master, you got to think about this whole thing as a problem. The problem here isn't that they're asking you for this. The problem is there's no way for them to get this information. Yeah. How do you solve that? Most ALM tools allow you to create all kinds of dashboards and widgets and blah, 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 right? So do that and say, oh yeah, you want that? Here's a link. Oh, by the way, in the future, you can hit that link. You'll get the most latest information anytime you want. Anytime, right? If there's anything else that you need, talk to my boss. No, let me know and I'll talk to my boss. That's usually a good way to go for a Scrum Master.
Yeah.
A bad way to go is to say, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right? If you keep saying yes, you're going to get more things thrown at you.
I mean, I agree with you and want to move on to this category, and I might clip this out of the podcast.
Sure.
However, like the people that just say yes and bend over,
Yes, men.
yeah, they advance in the organization.
They do.
The thing that you will deal with as a Scrum Master that I want to touch on, because I really like bringing it up, because a lot of Scrum Masters, as soon as they hear what I'm about to say, are going to cringe and do that. Ooh, they're going to do that face. You know what I mean? They're going to do that. Is the pressure to constantly deliver more velocity.
More. We want more.
More velocity.
Shakespeare's Oliver. Please, sir, can I have some more?
Why is there 10% less velocity this sprint? Hey, don't show velocity to leadership because it's not a good match. But also, they went to CSM, so they know velocity. That's what they want to see.
Hey, listen, I think the Agile community, the trainers, you know who you are, don't train leadership in velocity, for God's sake. Train them in delivery of business value. They're leaders. They're not managers. Don't tell them about velocity. Otherwise, this happens, right? We want more. We want more. Crack the whip harder. Oh my goodness, there are so many things you can say about this one.
Yeah, anyway, but I mean, this is a very real thing. Is stakeholders or management or leadership or whatever you want to call them, like they know velocity because that's one metric that people can see easily on inspection because most tools make it apparent right there. And some frameworks / tools / processes build velocity across teams in as a benefit.
Oh, goodness.
As if that's what you should be doing.
Right.
Yeah. Like none of which shall be named on this podcast because they're all. Ooh la la. Yeah.
They are.
There are times that I feel like a cursing bleep would be really good in our podcast. But this is very real. So the velocity pressure leads teams to overcommit. Velocity pressure leads teams to say, well, where the one manager walks in the room or the one senior developer walks in the room and the team says, we can do 20 points. And then one person is like, 20? Come on, guys. We can pull together and do this. You can at least do 85 when your normal velocity is 20. I mean, I'm facetious.
No, but you're not.
But also,
this happens.
This happens all the time. This has happened on nearly every team I've ever been a part of. Is you have some leadership stakeholder or senior member or somebody with something to prove that tries to be the hero to say we could do whatever our velocity is plus whatever they think the appropriate amount is.
So absolutely. Listen, where I've seen this really prevalent is in situations where there is a PMO. PMOs chart these things and they say, well, it's the same team. They should be improving every sprint. Right? I ordain, because they have no other way of coming up with this, I ordain that there should be a 15% improvement sprint on sprint in the velocity delivered. If that's what they're measuring, an incoming Scrum Master can very easily meet that goal.
Yeah.
Right? They got to talk to their team and say, look, we want to do 15% more. Can we do 20? Do I hear 25? All you have to do is estimate everything higher to the next level. Yeah. So what's a 3-point story is now a 5. What was a 5 is an 8.
Yeah.
Instant velocity gain. Yay.
Yeah.
The team's going to game it, right?
Sure.
That's the bottom line. So I think a Scrum Master who gets wind of what's happening here, right?
They need to move into the coaching mindset
they do.
To the organization.
That's a much better way of saying what I was going to say. They need to develop a spine and say, look, don't look at velocity. Look at what we're delivering instead.
Well, let me do the arguing agile. Let me pull the arguing agile today of arguing agile. That would be better if I had
somebody jumping off that chair.
Yeah. The arguing point here is that most Scrum Masters, we're talking about Scrum Masters, is they do not provide any other metric back up to the business. Yes. That is a failing here of why if the business is anchoring on velocity and pressing you on velocity, you've not provided them with business value. You've not provided them with throughput. You've not provided them with a reduction, increase, whatever, cycle time, lead time, that kind of stuff. You've not provided them the indicators which point them to better problems to work on.
Spot on. Absolutely correct, right? So when the organization and other people within it are focused on velocity alone, stand up and say, why? These are just numbers,
Yeah.
right? What have we delivered that is of value to the organization? Have we added new business value, or have we reduced our risk, right? Which is the whole work on tech debt reduction, all of that stuff. If you haven't done that, if you haven't had that conversation rather, then you're just going to be suffering this what's the word? I mean, this fate, I guess, ill fate of increased velocity, sprint on sprint.
Yeah, you're going to be caught in this trap if you can't. So
and it'll be seen as a failure on you, by the way.
Your leadership, your PMO, all the people we've been talking about in this, tech leads, whoever it is that doesn't know, they just don't know any better. They're not going to find a way out of this trap. Like, it's up to you to find a way out of this trap. So I would propose different metrics. I would just start, honestly, as Scrum Master, I would just start gathering these other metrics and start presenting them along with. Because if you just hide velocity, people are going to start asking for it.
Right.
That's fine. If you're at a company and they've never asked for velocity and you have never shown velocity, good job.
Yeah.
Ignore everything I'm about to say. If velocity is your only metric, start coming up with business value, start coming up with cumulative flow, start coming up with cycle time, lead time, come up with all those, see what the business takes to, and you'll be able to show ups and downs over time, just like velocity, right? And just slowly pull velocity down away from them until eventually they don't even look at it anymore. Okay. And maybe you don't even need to show the ups and downs of velocity. You can just show velocity to say, it's within one standard deviation of our mean.
I wouldn't even bother. Listen, when you get to the point where what he's talking about, you're delivering business value and you show that up front. As a Scrum Master, you get to decide the order in which you're showing these metrics.
Yeah.
So delegate velocity to the end.
Yeah.
And 2 sprints later, take it off your whatever you use in PowerPoint or whatever.
Sure.
You shouldn't be doing that, by the way. But yeah. So just don't even talk about it. Just say business value delivered. And here's something that can help you, right? So listen carefully. Just plot sprint on sprint, business value delivered as a metric. Now, if you're an incoming Scrum Master, which is how we started the podcast, just do that. Business value delivered, sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3. When you get to sprint 5 or 6, you can be a little bolder and say business value committed to, business value delivered, right? This is what I usually call X/Y. X was committed to, Y was delivered, okay? When you get to that point, how you get to that point successfully is by partnering with your stakeholders, by your sponsors, and say, we're thinking about taking on these things in the next sprint. How would you rank these for business value? Pick a scale, but keep it consistent. Don't change it. 1 to 5, 1 to 10. It doesn't matter what it is.
1 to 3.
Whatever it is, right? Just keep it the same. And then say, you said this was a 1, which is the highest priority, or whatever, 3. It doesn't matter, right? Just stay consistent and say, we committed to a 1, we delivered a 1, we're good. Or we committed a 3, we only did a 2, right? But don't leave it like that. Don't say, we committed to a 3, we delivered 2. That's only half the story, right? The other half of the story is, we committed to a 3, we only delivered 2 because ... Fill that in. Because, right? Because we learned about this one issue facing these 5 customers that we jumped on right away, and we worked on that. So that's something that you, the stakeholders, didn't even know about before the sprint. So you didn't get to rank business value on that piece of work, but it made our customers happy. So that's why we're a little low on this one, but we'll pick it up in the next sprint. So much better as a story than 48 story points and we only delivered 39, right? Those are meaningless numbers.
Moving on, the other thing that could happen is you could run into technical disagreements that you as a Scrum Master find yourself facilitating. I think of technical disagreements meaning, not meaning technologies. Because usually things like that get resolved pretty quick.
Yeah, they're pretty much dictated anyway.
Usually it's like how many bells and whistles we should put on a solution
That's
is usually
scope question.
Yeah. That could end up being this technical disagreement. For example, usually things that involve auditing have the biggest disagreements in my career, where we have to do something, but we want there to be an audit log. Well, how much stuff needs to be in the audit log in order for it to comply with the requests of we need to be able to audit?
Yeah. I've come across that specific one at least a couple of times, and both in regulated industries, just so happens, right? So the developers are, I have to say, they're thinking about this the right way. They're saying, well, we need to make sure that our work is auditable, right? That's fine. But then there's degrees. So two things I want to say about this. One is decisions like that, you really want to lean on your architecture.
Sure, yeah.
Right? You lean on enterprise architect, solutions architect, if you have one. Or if not, just a technologist who says, I kind of have a good view of how this should work, right?
A senior developer or a founder, if you have a founder that's a technical to help build a system, then them as well. Because a lot of times when I've been in this situation where I've been caught in a technical disagreement, also you're disagreeing on a technological solution because the people in the room are probably trying to future-proof a solution. And that's why they're trying to, they're not trying to gold plate this, the issue, but they are trying to say, I want to make sure I take care of these edge cases. That's the word that was in my head. They're trying to take care of edge cases before they crop up as problems. Product is usually the first person to help put guardrails on these conversations. But in case you're stuck with a product manager, I say manager right there, with intent, who doesn't know anything, who doesn't know anything about technology and just gets lunch and hands off to the dev lead everything they need done. I could easily see how this could be a problem. But the nice thing is if you're a Scrum Master and you're on a team like this and they are caught where they've talked about a thing over and over again they've burned 45 minutes on it, it may be up to you to kind of cut the conversation off, to say, hey, I see we're not making a lot of progress. Why don't I get this other technical person or this other team or this founder or this architect or this senior developer, get them in the room, get the product manager who's asking for a feature in the room. Get the appropriate people together, and why don't we have just another session on this and see if we can knock it out in that session. And I wouldn't go into that other session cold. I would prep the other people that are outside of the team with kind of the notes, your understanding as best as possible, so when they come in, they already have an idea. So, prep them, invite them, facilitate the session when it starts, and then I think they probably could take it away after that.
I agree. I think that session you talk about, facilitate that, but when you set it up, not only put in the agenda what are the choices that are being considered, also put in what decisions you want out of it, and then say, here are the expected outcomes, right? We'll make the decision, then we'll procure this tool, whatever the tool that of choice is that's being decided upon, etc. So yes, you can have some structure around this whole thing as well. But here's what I wanted to talk about just really briefly here. An architect who says we should do something, right? Understand their point of view. Why are they saying that? So it's that with them, right? What's in it for me? So why are they saying what they're saying? That's one thing that a good Scrum Master needs to be savvy at and say, oh yeah, they're talking about this because. And I'll just finish my thought about all this by saying it's not just the architect. Sometimes it's other people, like compliance, right? Sure. Compliance will come in and go, all that is fine. It's auditable, that's all good. But we have this regulatory requirement that we have to meet. Otherwise, no go to production, right? So understand what that is. Have the architects consider it, kind of go top down, because bottom up doesn't always work in this scenario, right? I came across this just really quickly not too long ago. Wow, 4 years ago. GDPR regulations in Germany. The client I was working with, all their data was stored in Germany at a data center. And when push came to shove and somebody came up with this idea that, hey, look, we have this regulation coming up, everybody panicked. Right? We had meetings upon meetings, and in the end, what happened is a decision was made to spin up a whole brand new data center hosted outside of Germany. So all this had to be done in the same scope of the original project. When I say scope, I mean the timeline, obviously, right? There was more money involved here, but that was made available. Magically, more money just came about when it comes to regulatory compliance. So, but a Scrum Master needs to kind of look ahead a bit and put it on their radar and say, they may not know about GDPR. What they can talk about is this data, where does it live? Do we have the data secured, right? Is it, what is it? What are the two different security requirements that people always talk about? Security, the data in flight and data at rest, all of those things. If you're not aware of those things, it's fine. You could be a great Scrum Master, not be aware. That's fine. Partner with your architect. Right? And then just talk about it in business speak with your product folks and say, what if the data is not secure? Wherever it lives. Where does it live, by the way? Right? Just so get ahead of it and then have the conversations and be bold enough to ask leadership for decisions and direction.
Yeah. So this is the end of the episode. I know we had a lot more points. We're going to cut the rest over to part 2, so stay tuned.
Yes, lots more to come. Part 2 has lots more goodness. We'll
That's right.
see you there.
That's right.